Wow. Dating apps in midlife. Who knew swiping right could feel a lot like ordering takeout? In this episode of Empty Nesters Taking Back Happy, I'm sharing the hilarious and sometimes eye-rolling lessons I've learned from venturing into the world of online dating. But it's more than just funny stories. We're talking about what this season of life teaches us about our identity, our courage to try new things, and the faith it takes to trust God with our new beginnings. If you're an empty nester reimagining your life with joy and clarity, you're going to laugh with me, or at least I think you're going to, and maybe even see a little bit of yourself in the process. Hi, friends. Welcome to Empty Nesters Taking Back Happy. I'm your host, Gina Granville, God's girl, retired homeschool mom of 4, empty nester, Gigi, essential oil and exercise enthusiast, Christian life coach, and someone who's taken back her own happy. I know many of you feel exactly like I've felt in these empty nest years, wondering if your best days are behind you, but feeling way too young and vibrant to sit on the porch and just watch life go by. What if you could reimagine your life, finding renewed faith, fresh identity, courage, clarity, and new beginnings in this season? If you're ready to figure out what comes next after an empty nest, throw on those walking shoes, pop in those earbuds, and join me right here as we take back happy together. Hey, my Taking Back Happy friends. I am currently updating my Taking Back Happy Facebook group, and I would love to have you in there. Hop on over to Facebook, join my group. I'm going to make it fun and interactive, and it's going to be a place where we can take back happy together. Hey, friends. So tonight I was thinking about my adventures with online dating. And let me just say that they did not last very long. They were very short-lived adventures, but I feel like I learned a lot of things from them. And so I want to share some of that tonight. I think it'll amuse you and also, encourage you. So the first thing I learned with online dating is swiping feels like ordering fast food. Swipe right for Chick-fil-A, swipe left for Steak and Shake. You know the drill. When I first got on the apps, I really felt like these are so dehumanizing because it's like you're looking at all these people and you're like, they have the same qualities as me. And then you're just looking at how they look, what their looks are. And you're like, swipe right, swipe left, It just didn't seem quite right. But it wasn't long before I kind of got into the flow of it. And so one of the first people that I met on there was this guy that I thought was pretty darn cute. He was like a little bit younger than me, and we had a lot of common interest, and I was like, ooh, okay. So this was my very first date in person from online dating. And so we met up, and I met him there's a bridge that I like to go and walk, and we met up and we did that. And the first thing out of his mouth was like, oh my gosh, you really do look like your profile picture. Which I guess that's a thing. People don't look like what they say they look like. But anyway, it was just so interesting. The more we walked and talked, the more I was like, I don't know about this guy. I mean, he seemed really nice. He was very cute. I was willing to see him again, but he was like kind of like off grid. Like he didn't work and he was pretty young. He was in his late 40s and I was like, I don't know about this. But I guess my overall observation was that the looks really dominate, but the character's kind of hidden because there's a lot of times you'll see common interest or whatever, but you don't really know someone's character till you get to know them. But if you don't really get to know them, if you're just looking at like, oh, cute, not cute, that sort of thing. And if we look at 1 Samuel 16:7, we know that man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. So that just gives us a hint right there that, yeah, while looks could be important, they're definitely not the main thing. And they're probably not what we're actually looking for in a long-term relationship. So I guess my first takeaway would be that God values what is unseen, and so should we. So the second thing I learned from dating apps was there is definitely a ghosting epidemic. Apparently, men think Casper is their dating coach. You know, Casper the friendly ghost. It wasn't long into this online dating experience till I realized that, yeah, this ghosting thing is for real. So, one of the first people I had dated, I didn't like answer quick enough. I was kind of like, do I want to give him my number? Do I not? I finally decided to give him my number, and then I never heard back from him again. I guess I just twiddled my thumbs too long. So I was like, okay, whatever. No big deal. So then I started talking to this other guy, and he was really nice. He lived up in Alabama, but not too far away. And we talked for I don't know, a week, It was a pretty long time and back and forth, and we were going to meet each other. We had done like a FaceTime and all that. And I was talking to him like the day before we were going to meet up. And I was like talking about my faith. And I was like, I've compromised so many times before, and I don't intend on compromising my faith at this point. And I guess he just took that like I was a criticism of him or something, because it wasn't long till afterwards he was like, how'd you think our call went? And I was like, I thought it went fine because we had called and talked in person and stuff. Before I know it, he just ghosted me. We were supposed to meet the next day, and he just never even, messaged me again. So I was like, okay, so this is how this works, huh? But I think the real life point is ghosting hurts because it avoids honesty and respect. And if we tie that in with God's word, Ephesians 4:25 says, therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor. Like, hey, let me know how you're really feeling. Tell me, I'm not that into you, or I don't want to see you again. But don't just turn into the ghost. I think my big takeaway was God calls us to courage and kindness in our words, even when it's uncomfortable. The third thing that I learned was just because it's labeled doesn't mean it's true. So, a lot of dating apps are specific. So there's like a Christian app, but that doesn't mean all men in there are strong men of faith. Or there's an over 40s app, but that doesn't imply instant maturity. Honestly, I think some of these guys should have been on a lost and found app, if you know what I mean. But all jokes aside, this was probably one of my funniest experiences I had with online dating. This was when I decided, you know what? I think I'm going to get into this group, and I can't even remember what it was called, but it was something like the right side or the right stuff or something. It was like a conservative dating app. So I was like, okay, this will be cool because I'll find some people that have some common interest, and that sort of thing beyond just, your hobbies, beyond just your faith, that sort of stuff. So I get in there, and it is not a huge app. There wasn't a whole lot of people, but I meet this guy from California. And he was super nice. I was like, oh my gosh. He just like intellectually, he was funny and he was smart, and we had good conversation back and forth. And I was like, okay, this is kind of fun. This is like the first person that's kind of been like challenging me and kind of, we're on the same thought process and all that. So I look at his picture, and I could see he's like some kind of politician or something, like a local politician for his little city. Cause I see him in this picture, and he's in this truck, and it has like vote for so and so. And so I look him up. And I find him. I was like, oh, wow, he's a representative or whatever he was. And it was out in California. So I start, reading all the things that he's saying. And I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. Okay, that's pretty good. And I was like, this really doesn't sound like, this really doesn't sound like someone with conservative values. This sounds like, a little bit different than that. But I was like, well, whatever. So I read a little bit further, and I see he's talking about something on a national scale at this point. And so I read it, and I was like, are you kidding me? I was like so mad because it was something that people had been saying, but it wasn't true. It had been debunked and everything. And he had it like on his website. And I'm like, are you for real? So I actually messaged him back, and I was like, hey, so what about this thing? And, we kind of talked about it and stuff. And I thought, my first thing was, oh, he's going to ghost me. But no, he didn't. He had the conversation and he was very polite and everything. So I did really appreciate that. But it was hilarious because I was like, why are you in this group? Like like, not only are you not, these aren't your values. You're like exact opposite of that, which I respect. That's fine. But why are you in this group? When we look at Matthew 7:16, it says, "You will know them by their fruits." And so maybe that's really a better way, not getting in these groups like, oh, this is a Christian group or this is a, certain group or whatever, but really just getting to know someone based on who they are. Again, going back to their character. And I think my big takeaway for that one is labels don't define character, actions actually do. The fourth thing I learned from the dating apps is jet ski guy may not be jet ski guy. Well, like the profile pics are often like wishful thinking. If you could see me right now, I'm making air quotes. Like that one photo they took 5 years ago. Interests don't always reflect reality. And compatibility requires more than just like surface level hobbies. At first, when I was getting on the apps, I was thinking, okay, the hobbies are what I'm really looking for. I want someone, besides basic character and faith and that sort of thing, I want someone with the same hobbies. But I'm not sure that was the way to go. I swiped right on this guy who had a very active looking profile picture. And a lot of his pictures, you put several of them up, and a lot of them were active things. They were, outdoorsy things or whatever. And once I got to know him, he really wasn't that way at all. He really wasn't that physical. Like, he had some physical ideas in mind, but they had nothing to do with hiking, if you know what I mean. Proverbs 4:23 kind of comes with sort of a warning to us. It says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. I think my main takeaway from that is, we got to look past like the props. The character is really what's going to sustain the connection, not those staged hobbies that look like they're the same as the ones that you like. And the last thing that I learned from the dating apps was defining what you really want. So apparently saying that you want a relationship or you want a serious relationship because all the apps have you, mark what you're interested in, actually translates to I'll marry you next week. The truth is learning that, okay, we can slow down, we can value friendship first and not be pressured by assumptions. That was a really big thing to me. And that was ultimately why I ended up getting off of the dating apps. I decided I didn't like the way they were set up because you have to say up front what you're interested in. And while I was interested in a long-term relationship, not just a, fly by the seat of your pants or a hookup situation, I wasn't necessarily interested in that with each person that I met. I wanted to get to know them. I wanted to see if we were compatible. I wanted to find out if over a period of time, if we still enjoyed talking about things or there were things we had in common. I wanted to see how that person interacted with people around us, to see how he treated the waitress when we were at a restaurant, to see someone's character over time. There was this one guy who was very, very kind, and he was a widower. And we talked for, I don't know, a month, maybe a long time, back and forth. The thing was he was not overseas, but he was out to sea, I guess. He worked on one of those oil rigs that were out in the sea. So it wasn't like, we could meet up or anything like that. But we talked for a pretty long time. He was super nice. And he was just kind of presuming that we were further along than we were. I mean, I had never even met him in person. And he was starting to ask me things like, oh, would you travel up to so-and-so and go to a ball game with me? Would you do this or that? And I was like, well, I'd probably want to meet you first in person. It was just, he was presuming that we had this whole relationship because we were talking on this app and because of the way that he had set his up and I had set mine up and that sort of thing. So that was the thing that really at the whole end of everything, I was like, I really don't think this is for me. Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. And I think that is so true, especially when it comes to relationships. So I think my big takeaway was that God honors pace and patience and intentionality, and relationships grow in his timing. It's not like you can just hop on this app and you're like, ooh, there's my Prince Charming. And that just sums up life, right? So my Taken Back Happy friends, these are some of the things I learned from online dating. Dating apps reveal both really the funny quirks of modern dating and the timeless truth that what God values hasn't really changed. Even though times have changed, God has not changed. Whether you're single, whether you're dating, whether you're single and not dating, or whether you're married, God calls us to honesty and character and seeking his heart above all things. So maybe dating apps aren't all bad. I mean, after all, they gave me a pretty good laugh to share with you guys and a few stories as well. And if you have that perfect brother-in-law or that best friend or that guy friend from church, maybe you just need to send them my way. Okay, maybe not. Maybe I'm just going to continue Taking Back Happy right where I am right here, right now. And on that note, just remember, hop into that Facebook group. I'm super excited about the changes I'm making. I think you'll really enjoy connecting with me and with other ladies that are in this season of life. They're just really wanting to, kind of figure out what's next after an empty nest. If this podcast blessed and encouraged you today, I'd love for you to share it with your friends. You can take a screenshot and share it in your stories, but make sure you tag me at Gina Granville so we can connect. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Make sure you join my Taking Back Happy Facebook group. I'll meet you back here soon, and we'll continue Taking Back Happy together.